bed for 5 days, and finally I got up and started to walk a little. Now, this is the only time I can say that I never was without pain. The first 2 months, when every month I'd go back and they would give me drugs, and it was just like a miracle to me. I didn't ache, you know, like I used to, and it felt so wonderful not to have this terrible aching pain all over my body and my back. But I went to these 2 doctors for 7 months, and finally the drugs no longer worked. My body was so used to all these drugs that after a while it wouldn't work. And that's when somebody in California told me about Kathryn Kuhlman. So I started to watch you on television. And I hear...
Oh, did it begin with television?
Yes. And I would hear how these various people, you know, were healed by God.
Did you believe as you watched the
I believed it. Yes, I did. I believed that.
And yet it was new to you.
It was very new to me, right. And we might have watched maybe 2 months.
Had you never been in a miracle service?
No, I've never been there.
Were you church people?
Yes, yes. We left the Christian Missionary Alliance Church back east when the doctors sent me
west. But you had
never seen anything like it.
And the telecast was your first?
First time. And we might have looked at it a couple months when we decided we're going.
To the Shrine?
To the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. And the very first time we went, I saw so many miracles, blind people seeing and deaf people hearing and people get out of wheelchairs and walking. And
what'd you do the very first time? You just sat there?
Well, I was so amazed, but I believed. I knew it was God. And then you mentioned the next time you would come back, so we went back the next time. But
so
we went on a
happened
bus.
The first time?
Nothing happened the first time.
You were just so interested, you were watching everybody else?
I was watching these miracles. So I went back the second time, and again, we went on a bus this time, a chartered bus from Corona. And again, I
You could hardly believe it the second service.
Oh, I couldn't wait. But I wasn't healed the second time. The third time I went...
But you didn't get discouraged?
Oh, no. I just thank God for all the people that were healed. It made
and kept
me so
watching
happy.
The telecast?
Yes, and I kept watching, listened to you on the radio, you know. And so the third time I went, it was on Mother's Day, May 14th, 1967. And we left real early in the morning. Now, I couldn't stand more than 5 minutes at a time unless I would bend my body in half because my back would be so bad. And, well, I couldn't, with all these thousands of people standing around, I couldn't move. So my pain was so great. But the services started at 1:30, and it was 20 minutes of 5 that afternoon when a lady came into me and she said, "I'm Ruth. I'm Miss Kuhlman's helper." She said, "God is healing you." And I just looked at her. She knew nothing about me now, and you didn't know anything about me. So she asked me to come out in the aisle, and I went out in the aisle. And she said, "You're in terrible pain, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I've had 13 doctors in 19 years. I said, drugs no longer worked. I said, I've arthritis all through my body and a very bad back condition." So she says, "Let me see you move your hands." So I go like this, because they were stiff. I missed maybe 4 baths or 3 baths anyways so far that day. And she said, "Well, raise your arms. How far can you raise your arms?" Now, I had lumps on my shoulders from the arthritis and a lump in my back. So I raised my arms like this, and I reached down.
You mean that was all the higher?
Well, it hurt too much to go too far because my shoulders were so bad. And then she told me to reach down and touch the floor as far as I could, and I couldn't reach down very far at all. And all of a sudden, my hands became so limber, and I began to go, my hands, I can move my hands. And I began swinging.
Were you
my
amazed?
Hands. I was so surprised, yes. And I was moving my hands like this, and then after a while, my body felt just like my hands. So I began to say, my body feels just like my hands. My body feels just like my hands.
I'm
so
all this
limber.
happened right there in the service.
Yes, I was so limber, and I always felt so stiff. And then I felt God touch my head, and it just felt like an electric shock that went from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And I scream and I yell, I'm healed, God healed me. And I began to cry. And that's when Ruth took me up to the platform.
And all of this happened during the service?
All during the service. And it was at the very end. There was only, it was
what
20
was the sensation? Oh, you mean just before the benediction?
Yeah, just before the very end. But I still made it up on the platform. And we used to watch you with binoculars. And yet
you mean at the shrine?
At the shrine, it's so big, yeah. And where we'd sit, we couldn't see very good, you know, it's so far away. So we'd take turns looking through the binoculars. And yet, when God healed me, I went up on the platform, and I don't remember walking up there. And all I can say is, I remember you had a white dress on with white sleeves, and you reach over to touch me, and I saw this white arm, and I fell over in the power. This was all new to me. And somebody picked me up, and then they started to sing, He Touched Me. And that was the end of the service. I walked back to my seat, and we walked out, and in the back I saw Ruth, and Ruth said, "You have received a tremendous healing. We'd like to put you on tape next month." So the next month I did come back, and it was on tape. But I walked back to the car, no aches, no pains. We went to
That was in 1967?
1967. And we went back to our apartment, and the first thing I did was call my sister in Florida, and I said, "God healed me today at Kathryn Kuhlman service."
What did she say?
Oh, she was so thrilled, because she lives in Florida now, but she knew how I ached for all these years, and she was so happy for me.
Tell me about the sensation.
It
Because
felt
I'm
like
always so interested in that. You see, I know that I have nothing to do with these healings, and I'm always so interested in the personality of the Holy Spirit and how he works. You see, it's such a beautiful experience. What was the sensation when you were healed?
Well, I could feel God's hand on my head. That's all I can say. It was on my head. I felt it, and it felt like an electric shock that went from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And when it reached the bottom of my feet, every pain left me. I had no
Were you
pain.
standing?
I was standing out in the aisle in the Shrine Auditorium.
Stand up and show me just exactly what it was like. We were ready for the benediction.
Well, it was 20 minutes to 5 now, see, when I was standing out in the aisle. I still went forward. You know,
Yes.
I went forward to the front of the, up on
Yes.
the platform. But when I was just standing out in the aisle, and you were up front, many people were going forward being healed. And, well, all I can say, when I was standing in front of Ruth, and God touched my head, well, it just went all through me.
But
And I started to
your
cry.
hands were the first. They began
My
to
hands,
loosen.
it was my hands that got so loose, you know, just like this. And then it was my whole body, and I was yelling. I was saying, "My body feels just like my hands." I was so limber when God touched my
Did you raise your arms then? and
Well,
your
I was just going like this, and, you know, with my hands and my body, and then when God touched me, well, it's just like I remember, well, I don't even remember walking up on the platform. I remember crying and going
Was your
forward.
spine completely loosened?
My everything in my whole body. And after I went back now, when I went back to Corona, after I called my sister, I called our pastor at church, and I went to church and spoke in church that night. This was all new to many of them. And anyways, we lived out in California for a month, and we decided we're going back to Pennsylvania. Many people said to me, "Aren't you afraid to go back to that damp climate?" And I said, "Oh, no, God, I know God healed me." Well, I went back to Pennsylvania, and my husband was a builder in his own business when we sold out and went west. And we bought land the very first week, and the second week we started to build a house. I was out there every single day. I shoveled dirt, I shoveled stones, I helped to pound the floor, I carried bags of cement, I lifted the shingles on my husband's shoulders, and I just did everything.
What'd your husband say?
Well, he is so happy. We go from church to church. We charter a bus to Pittsburgh now.
You mean just to tell it? And
Just we tell everybody we see, we tell. Coming across the country, we tell every place we go.
Oh, I
every
can believe it, Betty.
Every motel, everywhere we eat, just everywhere we
Because
tell.
you know what you suffered for 19
sure
years.
do.
Your husband had to live with you.
That's right.
And he knows how real it is.
That's right.
And this was all instantaneous.
It was all instant. My lumps from my shoulder disappeared, my back. And at the time, well, I'm so excited, I didn't even realize it. The little lady next door noticed my lumps gone. I was out in the laundry room working, you know, the next morning, washing, and she saw my lumps disappeared. At the time, I didn't even think about that. I was so happy telling everybody and calling everybody. And even out in California.
And your gratitude has never left.
It's never left. I think of it every minute, every
Betty,
day.
Your